Welcome Research Group.
All right, thank you, Josh. So before we start, just know everyone that my name is Sung Lee. I was the current head of the research group. I'm going to send everyone a link to our Medium article. I must say it's quite girthy, but it will give you a pretty good preview as to what we're going to go over. I'll be sharing a presentation. Everyone on my team will be giving up their parts. So do spare me a moment, friends. All right, you should be able to see this. So we showed up a long time about the name. We want something like, blockchain, Iceland's final frontier, but ultimately we have here fortifying Iceland tourism industry blockchain. And the names of the people involved in this project are quite extensive. So everyone, I like to give attention to everyone here, and I'm very grateful for their accomplishments. So I'll get things started. But before we do, just know everyone that this project was concerning about the healthcare as well as the tourism industry regarding Iceland, and we partnered up with IBM as well as the University of Iceland. And as a disclaimer, we had no financial ties with these organizations. We did this for purely research purposes. So just some food for thought as we go on. But if nothing else, I think we'll start with the background as to the context.
So this project was really initiated by the desire of the Icelandic government and the general tourism industry to recatalyze that strong historical focus on tourism that Iceland has had. So before COVID, there had been a slight decline in tourism, and COVID only accelerated that decline. And historically, tourism has been a huge impact on Iceland's economy. And this obvious economic impact was of significant concern to the Icelandic government and the locals that are benefiting from that tourism. And the implementation of quarantine measures for travelers, even as the pandemic has kind of changed and hopefully died down in certain areas, has kind of continued some of the restrictions on tourism. And ultimately, the healthcare system is still vulnerable. Of course, there are new variants of COVID going around, and it can be difficult to access healthcare. There are many high-risk patients in Iceland itself that are already taking a toll on the healthcare system. And due to budget cuts, due to that aforementioned existing decline in tourism, we're trying to make sure that blockchain can actually serve as a potential solution for some of these problems and help reignite the tourism industry. Our three main solutions are the IBM Digital Health Pass, which is a symptom tracker, a digital heat map, and other forms of reducing frictional travel in Iceland.
Yes, so our first design proposal will be frictionless travel, which, in other words, is what works when data is shared in a safe way to ensure people's safety as well as others. And as AJ mentioned before, COVID-19 hit the whole globe. Iceland was having reduced tourism, but tourism rates were still high, which meant that there was a lot of overcrowding and damage to Iceland's environment. Iceland is known for its natural habitat, and so that was being damaged, and Icelandic officials were very concerned. Now that vaccines are rolling out, the Icelandic government wants to allow tourists back in while keeping Iceland's citizens safe, and we will examine that with our solution. Next slide, the IBM Digital Health Pass. So our solution, this IBM Digital Health Pass runs on a blockchain platform and allows tourist health credentials to be verified without violating user privacy. Next slide. So the way IBM Health Pass works is, in terms of reducing frictional travel, is that the issuer, in our case, the healthcare provider, will give the holder, in our case, a tourist, access to their COVID tests or vaccine records and relevant healthcare records so that it complies with what the Iceland government's requirements are to enter the country, and you would upload that onto their platform. So when the tourists arrive at Iceland's airports, the airport security would then act as the verifier and verify that the tourists meet the criteria, as in they had negative COVID tests or are vaccinated. And the next slide shows kind of the user interface of what the user will see. So you'll see the COVID-19 test results, the PCR test results, And then the QR code will be able to be scanned and shown to the verifier so that the relevant health records will be shown to them and the tourists will be able to enter the country. Next slide. So the values of this IBM Health Pass, IBM Digital Health Pass being implemented would be first and foremost safety. So the government of Iceland will be able to control who comes into the country by only allowing people who meet their standards of entry into the country. Standardization and authenticity kind of go hand in hand, where we move away from physical records that can be easily tampered with and move to a digital model. And since this is a blockchain platform, it is very hard to fake information. So authentication is not really an issue that we are seeing with people trying to fake their healthcare credentials to go potentially visit other countries. The Digital Health Pass also maintains user privacy while ensuring that the user is safe for travel. So how it works is that it only reveals information necessary for entry and that is authorized to view by the holder. So this system gives a lot of power to the holder. And with the correct implementation of the IBM Digital Health Pass, we would be able to lower the current COVID testing requirements by the government of Iceland, but also ensure that citizens and visitors alike are protected and safe. And if this implementation succeeded, we might, other countries could potentially use Iceland's model and implement their own health passports to allow more tourists in country without jeopardizing their citizens' health. And these are the main takeaways of what I just, basic summary of what I just talked about. And I'll pass it on to Hani.
Yeah, so our second design proposal was about informing tourists. Yeah, so as COVID-19 has gotten increasingly dangerous and important to track, tourists in Iceland have had increasing demand on like the whereabouts of the disease. So like entering areas with hotspots of COVID has been a problem to incoming tourists who want to avoid the virus at all costs. And so these issues are in line with the problems of the tourist firms who want to maximize the safety of the tourists. So our proposed solution is for the tourist firms to issue a blockchain-based solution based on proof of authority to generate a database of COVID-19 symptoms among the tourists and display that data online as a heat map. So this application would be mandatory to complete every day while a tourist is visiting Iceland, and would give users warnings about being near or in a COVID hotspot through notifications on the phone. And so as you can see, here is our application design. So on the left displayed is the homepage of the application, which has 4 options. The symptom check button is the button the user would fill out every day, which lists out questions for the user to fill. And based on that information, a heat map would be created, which could be accessed by clicking on the heat map button, also on the homepage. The profile button on the homepage would simply display the user's name, symptom, and location, and then the FAQ button would list a general set of questions someone may have about the application or COVID in general. And so next is the general flow of the system that's outlined as follows. So what would happen is first the user would open the proposed symptom tracker app, and then the location of that individual would be accessed through the phone and stored on the blockchain, while the profile of the individual is stored locally on the phone. And so what would happen is the symptom tracker application will check the region of the individual, and if there's a lot of symptoms near X kilometers of that location, a notification will be sent on the phone to that individual, alerting potential danger. And after the location check, the user will be directed to the homepage where the user would fill out the symptom check. And if any of the questions to the symptom checks are yes, the symptom status and location would be added to the blockchain, and that data would be added onto the heat map for that heat map to be generated on everyone's application. And so the value adds of here, there's 5 main value adds. So first is anonymity. So when a user inputs information about symptoms into a system, their identity isn't disclosed because the profile of the user would be off-chain while the location and symptom status of the individual is on-chain. So that disconnect between the profile and the user's identity and also the symptom of the individual would basically make the user's information anonymous. And for the second one, authenticity, this tracker is on an immutable audit trail on blockchain. So it's impossible to modify or destroy any information of the individual. Visual representation, of course, there's a heat map to see visually where and which areas are congested with COVID symptoms. Personal alerts, users are notified if they are in X kilometer proximity of a significant amount of COVID symptoms. And also flexibility. This design could be used not only for COVID-19, but also for future pandemics or diseases that may come up. And so there, we recognize 2 possible alternative solutions to this tracker. One alternative solution is the Google COVID case maps, which we seem to rule out really right away because Google doesn't seem to have a lot of data or information about the symptom or case status in Iceland. As you can see in the picture, there's no data on for the past 14 days in Iceland. And the other main alternative solution could be Rakning C19, which is an official app from the Icelandic government to help mitigate COVID spread. And one big drawback of this app was that there's no anonymity to the system, meaning like the government has full access to someone's personal identity, symptoms, and locations, which could lead to possible unfair use by the government. And yeah, the government could basically have all of your information. And so putting that all into context, some for the core takeaways is the blockchain really needed. This was a question that's very important to this proposal, and our hypothesis is that blockchain is not really necessary if Rakning 19 can be modified to generate heat maps, assuming that the app encourages tourists to track their symptoms on a daily basis. But again, the big drawback of this is that Icelandic government would need to be trustworthy, and also yeah, the big problem is that the Icelandic government has information to the location, symptom, and identity of the individual, which for some could be a breach of privacy. And how can blockchain system be better than a centralized system? In terms of this question, blockchain system is still valid because it allows for anonymity, and consensus mechanisms such as proof of authority would allow this blockchain system to have lower energy consumption compared to like other consensus mechanisms such as proof of work or proof of stake. And for the third question, how can symptom tracker be applied in future scenarios? Yeah, so this is like a question where this symptom tracker could be used for future diseases or pandemics because it's very easily transitionable from like a COVID-based app to maybe another disease.
Yeah, so I'm the next one up for design proposal 3. My proposal revolves around promoting sustainable tourism by economically incentivizing patronage at small businesses. So the real problem is that from 2010 to 2018, tourism played a really crucial role in the Icelandic economy. As of 2019, I believe tourism accounted for around 8 to 9% of the total national GDP and around 16% of the workforce. But unfortunately, in 2019 and 2020, the total number of overnight tourists in Iceland dropped by nearly 80%. And then to supplement that, we see that citizens in Iceland are generally frustrated because of the behavior and the spending of tourists while they stay here. And so that was where the problem that I designed and the research group as a whole designed this proposal around. The next slide talks about what our solution is. And generally, when I've just found in life experience, solutions generally come in two forms, either by making something require less effort or making it cheaper. And so while the first and second proposal aim to increase the number of healthy tourists and increase the ease of travel in Iceland, the third proposal strives to increase patronage at local businesses and make that easier and cheaper. So our incentives really exist through a customer-based loyalty system that's very similar to the existing methods at major airlines with the miles points, or hotel chains with points for overnight stays. But instead of doing it in general currency, we're going to do it based off blockchain tokens that provide for greater security and flexibility at these small businesses. So the main stakeholders are the small business owners, obviously, and the tourists, very clearly, and then the Icelandic policymakers, who I think are really have to hope to sustainably bolster foreign tourism given the amount of impact it has in the national economy. So upon arriving in Iceland, we have to figure out how we apply and execute this system. The way that we went about it was by creating an app that tourists download and install that has a map of the small businesses. The tourists can make purchases on their app by clicking on the businesses on the app. And when they make the purchases, they earn tokens for the amount of money that they spend at the small business. So kind of you can see it in this figure a little bit. It's a little bit complicated, but when a transaction occurs, we can see that there are three nodes: the customer or the tourist, the business, and then the blockchain algorithm. Generally, for each purchase, the business is obviously going to sell the product to the tourist, and the tourist is going to provide the money in exchange. And then the tourist is going to upload a picture of their receipt to the app, which is received by the blockchain algorithm. And the blockchain algorithm is going to provide a discount token to the tourist that will be registered on the blockchain. The business is going to upload a receipt as well. And both of these receipts are going to contain specific QR codes specific to the business that goes back and tracks the cash flows created by the entire system. But we'll get to that in a little bit. And then the manager is also going to give the seller token to the business. And so that's kind of the point of sale design that we're looking at for this. That's the backbone of this larger system, if that makes sense. So kind of to revolve that around, give it a little bit more perspective, a tourist is going to receive discount tokens for each purchase they make, and they can then redeem those tokens at the next small business, obviously for a discount. So if the traveler uses those tokens to pay $95 to the second small business instead of $100, then in turn, at the end of the month, or at the end of the period that Icelandic government decides to check these cash flows at, the small business will receive a check from this manager for the difference of $5 because, actually I'll get to that in a minute, but at the beginning of every month, the businesses are going to pay a certain amount of cash flows to the manager to stay into the association. And so that's going to really fund the discount that the businesses front later on. But I'll get back to that in a little bit because I know that there's a lot of information just on one slide. So just an example scenario of how this would work in greater detail. Let's say for an entire month, and that's how I revolve this because I figured it's easier to attack it from a monthly perspective. Customer A is going to give $9,000 to firm A, and they're going to get 18,000 discount tokens in behind. And then in exchange, at the bottom right quarter here, we'll see that the customer A will front their 900 total discounts at firm B. And so then firm B is going to have to get that amount paid back by the blockchain system, that money. And so what we see here is $3,900 in the entire amount that the blockchain system is going to have to front. And so that amount that the blockchain system fronts comes from the cash flows that are entirely generated from this business. So when we see the $39,000 out here to the left, some of that will be put back in to the total fund to fund these discounts. That's kind of where that money is coming from. And we see a self-sustaining cycle in the long term because the cash flows from the business will sustain and fund any deficits or any discounts. I think that's the next question. Next slide, Sam. So I think a few value adds, and I think a few of them have already been touched on either in this specific proposal or in previous proposals by Josh and Han-hee. I think the first two come kind of self-explanatory. We're going to hopefully see an increase in tourist sales. That's the backbone of this presentation. We think that if we can increase spending at small businesses, we can increase tourism in the long term by bringing about more satisfaction on the tourist perspective and also from the citizen perspective, because there will be more spending at small businesses and more interaction between tourists and citizens. And then the next two kind of come hand in hand because we see that there's a lot more loyalty management systems being created today and subscription-based services in smaller businesses. But that's really costly to develop a system that's tailored to that one business. So by creating one entire customer loyalty system, it reduces the cost across the board with all of these small businesses contributing to the creation of that system and upholding that system. So it's a little bit less expensive. And then obviously because the system is fronting those discounts, and again, like there's going to be reduced risk from a financial perspective with the businesses. And then blockchain creates the trust and the security by tracking all the purchases, and the flexibility is really evident through being able to apply these discounts at a variety of different, for all of the different businesses that are in the system. So those are the value adds we see from the system. Yeah, this is the primary alternative solution. I can never pronounce this city name. Song might have to help me out, but Reykjavik is generally, sorry Song, is generally the easiest and most inexpensive way to join because they use a percentage-based model that I think occurs at like 9 attractions in the city. I think it's 12 restaurants. There's like 9 shops and like 2 pools, like thermal pools, which is great. Like I'm not at all, you know, saying there's any negativity around that. I love that, but I don't think it's all encompassing when we go to Iceland. Obviously, it's a much smaller country than the United States or in many other countries around the world, but I don't think it incorporates enough of the small businesses. So, and obviously it's a city card and we're trying to expand into a little bit more areas than just the capital. So that's the main alternative solution that we see, but we think that ours provides greater flexibility and just greater experiences across a wide variety of attractions and shops and restaurants. Yeah, I think, again, primary takeaways that we see pretty self-explanatory are the flexibility and security in applying the tokens and obviously being economically more feasible from the customer perspective, as well as the ease in tracking transactions and onboarding individuals. I think it's a relatively simple process in terms of the point of sale. And then it's just a matter of the paying back and refronting all the discounts at the end and beginning of each month. That becomes a little more complicated, but we really see a lot of viability in the tourists earning discounts. And then we think that the businesses will be financially incentivized because they'll gain more money from it long term. So it's somewhat of a self-sustaining system. We don't think that the system will negatively impact on the large amount of cash flows that are outside the system as well. So that kind of gives a rundown of this proposal. I think I went way over time, so I am sorry for that.
Not a problem at all, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our presentation, and right now we'll be answering any of your questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So thinking about the 3 proposals as a whole, is there any proposal that like really stands out as like maybe the most pressing or the most feasible to implement into Iceland today?
That's a good question. I think we as an entire research group have varying opinions, but seeing as how Alex is on mute, maybe he has a strong opinion on a particular stance.
I think Han-hee's is very applicable to the modern day system that we've seen in terms of tracking symptoms internationally. So I think that's the preeminent proposal.
And regarding the IDM Health Pass, the truth be told, a lot of the resources we got from that particular design proposal was from the marketing department. And with Anthony, we had to sign an invisible non-disclosure agreement. So even all the materials that I want to say, I cannot say as legally obliged. So there's still a lot of ambiguity in that particular design proposal. But give the paper a read, everyone, and hopefully that'll shed some more light into the subject. Any other questions?
So like for the first two proposal, I understand that like because it's related to like healthcare privacy, and then it makes sense to like incorporate the blockchain to space. And for the like third one, I'm wondering like why should we use blockchain to and then like give out the token to like those travelers? Yeah, like can it be replaced by a centralized system? And what are like the like main value added blockchains in the third proposal?
Yeah, I can answer that. So really the whole idea is we want small businesses that aren't getting a lot of tourism, like that aren't getting a lot of tourists to come in, like that are spending money there. We want them to be incentivized to come spend money there through that loyalty discount token. And the idea is that these small businesses, it might be local diners, it might be other, maybe like a bookstore, for example. They don't have much excess capital to spend to risk to take on too much risk for a loyalty program. So the idea is through this group-based program, some of the risk is offset, and it's going to make it a little bit more convenient for small businesses that don't have that much income in the first place to be able to take on the system and get some benefits from the tourism industry.
And where does like blockchain come into play?
Yeah, the biggest part about blockchain in this system is these are businesses that are competitors to each other, and they need to establish a set of rules for the organization as a whole to operate. So really, if you set the terms of agreement into the blockchain algorithm themselves, then there's less risk for the small businesses to, for example, need to take on a lawsuit if one of the parties does not follow through with the agreements.
Got it. Thanks.
If there are no more questions, thank you everyone so much for attending tonight. I hope you guys learned a lot, and we'll see you next fall. I think.
Alrighty.
Yeah, good job everyone, and good luck on finals.